Hi, welcome back to Ask the CBO. I'm Lisa Gonzales, Chief Business Officer here in Mount Diablo. And I've got one of the directors from School Services, Matt Phillips, who's done a great deal of work with us here in our district and helped me host one of these in the past. And he's going to talk to us about one or two of the components in the governor's May revisions and what the governor is proposing with this year's budget that we are taking into account as we get ready to prepare ours. And a lot of that has to do with the cost of living adjustment and some other components. So Matt, I'm going to let you take it away.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. Appreciate the opportunity to come back and join you again on Ask the CBO. I feel like a celebrity being able to join you here today. So there was a lot of information that came out from this year's May revision. For those who were watching the governor, or were not living under a rock, I should say, recognized the governor was making a tour around the state of California, acknowledging a lot of the different components that are in the current year's May revision. And one of those items that has really grabbed our attention at School Services is the cost of living adjustment. The cost of living adjustment is a component of the state budget where they recognize that the cost of doing business increases year over year. And so one of the mechanisms that the state uses to provide funding to school districts is through the cost of living adjustment. Now, for a lot of us, we may not be familiar with a COLA. We don't see a COLA in our personal lives other than the cost of purchasing things goes up each and every year. The cost of purchasing milk, the cost of bread, the cost of insurance. And so the COLA from the state's perspective is a way to provide funding to school districts to help offset those cost increases that are happening on the natural. Perhaps I can share some information via a slide, Lisa, that might help to illustrate what the COLA really means for school districts. All right, so this is some information that we had developed as part of our most recent May revision workshop. And I want to provide just a little bit of foundational information because the COLA, again, can be somewhat of an arcane topic for those who are unfamiliar with school finance. So in schools, the primary source of funding for school districts are students showing up each and every day. And depending on the grade level of the student that shows up, the state provides a predetermined amount of funding per student. Well, what the COLA does is it effectively increases the amount that the state provides per student based on those grade spans. So I will walk through just one quick example here. If we think about a kindergartner coming to school for the very first time in 2021, the state would have provided just over $7,700 to a school district for that particular kindergartner. Once we apply a 5.07% COLA, which is what the governor has proposed in his May revise, a kindergartner in the 2021-22 year, the state will provide almost $8,100 per year for that student. So that's great. We appreciate the acknowledgement of that. One of the things that we see at School Services that many school districts across the state are combating is declining enrollment, declining ADA, which really has been further exacerbated with the pandemic. And so while the COLA increases the funding per student, if you end up having less students year over year, that can actually wash out and neutralize any COLA that may be recognized from the state. And Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, but is Mount Diablo dealing with declining enrollment?
We have. So we've been declining an average of about 240 students a year.
Okay. So, one of the things that we're watching at School Services, and just to give a little perspective to this, as a state here in California, we are declining overall. Just a couple years ago, we had just over 6.1 million students in the state of California. And in the 2021 year, the state acknowledged that about 160,000 students dropped off the records, whether they went to private schools, they moved out of state, a very, very significant decrease in the number of students in the K-12 education system in California. You contrast that against a normal, traditional, non-pandemic year, and there's a decrease of about 20,000 students per year. So 8 years worth of loss in 1 year happened in the 2021 year. And that's relevant to this conversation because what the state did in acknowledgement of that is they created effectively a hold harmless where districts in the state of California will not be penalized through the 21-22 year for a loss of students. Okay, so Lisa, you mentioned that you guys are losing students. You won't actually have to foot the bill for those lost in students until the 22-23 year, beginning in the 22-23 year. We have termed that at school services as an ADA cliff. The reason why we use the term cliff is because there's effectively 2 years worth of lost students that will be hitting in the same year. And so while a 5% COLA is great for this year, a district who has lost 3% of their students over the last couple of years, right? So 3%, 3%. When you get to that 22-23 year, the funding is going to drop 6%, which would more than offset a 5% COLA this year. And so again, ADA cliff, it's going to be very, very painful for a lot of districts in the 22-23 year.
And I think it's also important to note that we would get the full amount of ADA if a student was at school every single day of the 180 days of the school year. But what we also have to factor in is we have to factor in whatever our attendance rate is. And we're at about 94.5 or so percent. So for us, if we were able to increase our average daily attendance, we would actually have more student or more funds in the district.
Yeah, that's a great point, Lisa. And this is the delineation between enrollment and attendance. For many years, school districts were funded based on students being enrolled in their system. So you think about a college, right? You enroll in college. We don't always necessarily go to college. Well, in the K-12 system, schools are not funded unless the students show up every day. Simply because a student is enrolled in a school district does not mean that the school district would receive funding. So in the example that we walked through for the kindergartner, for a kindergartner to generate the $8,092 in 21-22, they would need to be physically present in school each and every day. And each day a student misses, it's about $70 that's taken away from that total. So again, we want to maximize students showing up every day, not only from a financial standpoint, but from a programmatic standpoint as well.
Absolutely, definitely. So I know that you got another slide in here hiding for us.
I do. I want to share one more with the group here to really illustrate, how this COLA is impacting funding for districts, but then also some of the challenges that districts are facing. So there's a lot of colors on here. There's a lot of moving pieces, but I want to draw everyone's attention to the left side of the chart. And what we're looking at on the left side of the chart is both the 2021, so the current year that we're in right now, and then the 21-22 year, which is that budget year that we're talking about, where that COLA comes into play. In the current year, the pandemic year, schools did not take any cuts per se. There was no reduction in funding, but there was no additional funding provided by the state of California. There was no COLA that was provided. And so the funding, the rate at which the state funded students in 1920 is the same at what they funded in 2021. Even though there was no new revenues for schools in 2021 via a COLA, a cost of living adjustment, every school district in the state of California is dealing with pension cost increases, both for the California Public Employees Retirement System, CalPERS, and the state teachers retirement system, CalSTRS. There's also a component where we have salary schedules in public education, and if an employee was with us last year and they are with us again this year, they receive what's called a step increase. It's essentially longevity. That is an annual cost for school districts. We have shown just the average figure here. These aren't necessarily specific to Mount Diablo, but I certainly anticipate that Mount Diablo is experiencing the same cost increases in 2021. When we look at what the cost of living adjustment provides for the 21-22 year, it is a sizable number when you look at it in isolation. But recall that there was no COLA in 2021. So the COLA that is being received or proposed to be received in 21-22 not only has to cover those cost increases from 2021, it's also going to have to cover the cost increases for 21-22. Again, we see pension rate increases, CalPERS, CalSTRS, step and column, and we have a new brother here, a new sister, which is the unemployment insurance rate increase as well. One thing that I've heard across the state, Lisa, in my interaction with a lot of districts, is there's a consideration around health and welfare and maybe potentially a COVID bump with respect to health and welfare rates. Is that something that you're hearing locally?
No, we're hearing that, and we're our challenge with timing is that we've got to establish our budget within the next week or so. And then we're going to wait to see what CalPERS, which is our big medical insurance provider, is going to do with rates. But we are hearing that those rates are going to go up notably, again, because of that COVID bump that you just mentioned.
Great. Well, there's certainly a lot of cost pressures that are out there. We certainly want to acknowledge the governor for providing 2 years worth of COLA in the current year, recognizing that no COLA was provided in the last year. But again, a lot of headwinds for districts around the state of California.
Thank you. So Matt, this has been super informative. I always love it because you can always explain this better than any CBO I know. So thank you so much for being here. We look forward to having you back in the future, and we will certainly continue to have these conversations with our own community. So with that, that's the end of this week's Ask the CBO. If you've got questions in the future, please go ahead and send them to cbo@mdusd.org. Matt, thanks again.
Thanks, Lisa. Always a pleasure.